Hey everyone, and welcome to the Torch experiment. So in Torch, we're going to be creating a fire particle system. If you're not familiar with the Unity Shuriken particle system, it's not the original one that they started with in 1.0. Shuriken was introduced, I believe, in 3.5 or something like that, which was a much more user-friendly particle system that mimics like other engines and things like that. If you don't know how to use it or what it is, you can dive into the manual that Unity has. We will step through some of the pieces and parts in this experiment, but that is a good place to go for a refresher, kind of like how the terrain has a lot of pieces. It's another component that has a lot going on. So before you do an experiment, make sure to download the experiment package. The package has a scene and some other things in it. Package files, when you download them, can be when Unity is running, which I have Unity running right now with my scene. I'll zoom out a little bit. So here's my scene running. I'm going to pop open that zip file real quick. Downloads. And so double click on the zip file and it's going to open up with this Unity package. If Unity is running, you can just double click on the package and then it'll say import this package, and anything you don't have in the package, it'll say these are new, and you can then hit import. So I've now imported the Torch scene in here. I'm going to go ahead and unload this student scene real quick because we're not using it. And then go, when this imported, it should be under scenes and level design. So there's Torch. I'm going to real quick show you this is what it looks like without Torch running. Okay, and then if I load Torch, this is now what it looks like. Notice the torch is all turned off. That's because there's something in this scene that checked to see if the Torch scene was loaded. And there's the experiment scene attached to the back of it. In this experiment, we're going to be creating a puzzle where the player has to light all the torches in order to complete an objective. All right. So back over to here real quick. So in this, it says open the Torch scene, and then you're going to make a particle system. You're going to make an objective that checks if objects are active, and then you're going to play test the level. You can step through this page and follow it and use every number exactly that it says to create an effect that looks kind of like fire. It's not a very advanced fire, but it is kind of there. In this video, I'm going to do it without looking at this because I've done this so many times that it should just be all natural flow. So I'm going to do without looking at it, but trust me, if you walk through this exactly, it'll step you through how to change each variable to get something that looks like fire. We're going to make one that looks a little different, so if you follow the video, yours will look a little different than the one that is available to you. But this is all here just to show you. It goes over every bit of that, and then setting the, making the thing that lets you light up stuff. So I'm going to leave it here, but let's dive into the creation of a particle system. So with anything that you make in a game-related environment, or really an art-related environment, period, never go, I know what that looks like, and use the picture in your head and just start making something. By creating something off the cuff, you're creating what you think is the real version of it, but it's probably not exactly what it's supposed to look like. It's kind of like in, let's say, in elementary school or middle school, you had someone who was really good at drawing, and you're like, draw me, and then they hand you the picture and it doesn't look like you. Always use reference, always, and gather a lot of reference. The more reference you have, the closer you're going to be to creating something that looks like the real world equivalent. Scraps is supposed to be kind of this more real world environment, so we're going to build something that looks closer to a real world version of fire. So for reference, I could go to my backyard and set something on fire. Probably would be dangerous, But I could look at it and be like, cool, that's what that looks like. I could then, if I had a really expensive camera and or a phone, take photos of it as it goes or record it, and then if it's an iPhone, slow it down or whatever. But other people have already done this for us. There's so much stuff on the internet. So we're going to use the internet. The first thing I'm going to do is find out how it moves, and then I'm going to reference Fire for the actual creation. So in order to find out how it moves, I always like to go to YouTube and just pull up slow motion, and the slow-mo guys do it pretty well. So we're going to go over that, dive into their video real quick. And then in here, there we go. So looking at Fire in slow motion, Fire tends to pull and tear away from itself. It is gaseous, but it has a shape to it that is familiar to us. As Fire lays on top of Fire, it gets brighter. It goes from a dark orange to like a brighter, whiter yellow, or sometimes if it's a really intense fire, we get into the blues. Or rather, that's like oxygen deprived or something like that. I don't know, or more oxygen that causes that. Look it up. Anyways, so Fire, when it's on top of itself, gets brighter. You can see that it tears and pulls and kind of rotates away from itself, and then it separates into smaller pieces. It is semi-transparent. It starts out by fading in, and then it fades out over time. This is the motion that we're going to use to create our particle system. When it gets doused, you can see smoke and stuff come out. You can put smoke after it, but that's a whole nother particle system. You're worried about making fire. So we're going to make fire using that as a reference. Also, fire is a gas. We could open up, I don't know, a program and just draw a cloud or something and be like, there. But it's not going to look right. Everyone, you know, if someone looks at a picture of fire, it looks like fire. If you try to create fire from not fire, it doesn't work. So I like to use screenshots and or pictures of fire, such as that, to make fire. Yeah, it just looks like something. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to use pieces of it to then create fire. Because particles can be dots. We can add more dots to make it look more like fire. We can make faded dots to make something look gaseous, but why not just take a piece of fire and use it? So there's one that I really enjoy using, which is a little less detailed, but there's a really silly piece of something in here that makes me giggle and helps me make good fire. I'm going to boot up Photoshop to do my editing of this stuff. However, if you don't have Photoshop, you can go to this page, GIMP Shop. So GIMP by itself works like Photoshop, but it doesn't look like Photoshop. And if you've used Photoshop before and you're like, I'd rather use that, but you don't have a copy of it, this is close. And so it just changes the UI to work kind of like that, but it's free and you can use it. Or if you have Photoshop, go get it. Or if you have any other image editing program that has layers and transparency, use it. That's all we need. We just need a way to erase a image and see transparency to make a sprite. All right. So this is what I want. I'm going to save this image with my giant save as screen. I'm going to save that image to my desktop. And then we're going to use it in Photoshop. Let me boot up Photoshop real quick. I probably should have had that running. I'm going to use Photoshop CC 2015. There we go. Pull this over here. Make it real big. And go File, New. Now when creating a size for a texture or an effect or something like that, games play better with powers of 2. So if your textures are, I don't know, 24 by 24 or no, I'm sorry, not 24 by 24, like 128 by 128, 256 by 256, 512 by 512, 1024 by 1024, that sort of thing. the powers of 2 that go into textures, or if you've noticed the amount of memory that your game consoles have had. Whenever textures are stored, they're usually stored in a power of 2. If they're not in a power of 2, they'll stretch it and fit it to that in memory, and then it doesn't come out looking the way that you wanted it. So we're going to start with a 128 by 128 texture. I'm just going to leave the resolution and everything else the same and hit OK. And then that's going to create a giant brush. Let me get rid of this, please. So this is about the size that I'm going to use. This, because of my screen size, is really hard to see, so I'm going to pull this off, and I'm just going to describe what tools I'm grabbing, because the tools are the same in a lot of different programs. So I'm going to use the magnifying glass to zoom in on this little canvasy thing. I can right-click and do fit on screen if I wanted to, but this is good. And then I'm going to, right now my layers are set up with just a white background. This is like if I open up MS Paint or something, it's just white behind it. If this has layers though, you can add a new layer. You'll notice that I have this, this grid, this checkerboard behind it. Checkerboard in most things is a reference of transparency. So this is a transparent background now, not white. This will help me with making this sprite. So I'm going to pull back up that image I downloaded. There it is, Fire 1. I'm going to drag Fire 1 in here. And there's a piece to this that I want, as I mentioned before. Fire looks like it's kind of made out of like a chicken wing shape. Like a chicken wing shape. There's a good piece of what I think fire is made out of. So I'm going to use that. You can place it like I just did, or you can cut around it. But I'm going to go with this. And I need to make sure that this is a rasterized layer. So I can right click and just do rasterize. What Photoshop was doing is you can reference an image rather than add it to the file and the file size. You can reference something that's outside of the program. This would be like if I copied something and pasted it right into like MS Paint or something. So now I've pasted it in. Here's my weird chicken wing shape. I'm now going to use an eraser that is a little feathered. So like a feathered eraser of a smaller size. And then I'm just going to use my mouse and cut around it. As I erase, I can see the checkerboard behind it. My opacity should probably be 100. In case you don't know what opacity is, Unity has it for transparency as well. 100% opacity is full-on color, and as you reduce it, it goes to transparency. So if I want transparent, I would reduce the opacity or erase things, and let's see the checkerboard. I'm changing my brush to be, it's 100% opacity in the center of this brush, and then it fades out when it gets to the end, which should give me a feathered look to it. And now I can separate this weird chicken wing shape. You don't see it at first until you start pulling it away. And it makes you think about what you want for lunch. Unless you don't eat meat. That's fine too. So there's a shape. Cut this down a little bit. And then this shape right here, you can use straight up as is if you wanted these colors to stay the same all the time. I'm going to modify the colors in Unity in the particle system. So if I want to modify the colors, I need to make sure there's no color and it's just value. So I'm going to remove the color by changing it to, let's do desaturate. It's going to pull out all the colors. Now it's grayscale. And then one more thing that I'm going to use to make this finished. Actually, I'm going to make sure I got rid of all the potential not chicken wing fire out here. That's not what I want. Just in case there is anything that is not fully erased because I had a feathered brush, I'm just going to cut around this. I'm just using the lasso tool. There, I cut around it. I can then Control X to cut layers, make a new one, and paste it, Control V, and then turn those off. There. Now we have just that image and transparency. So I'm going to go to a tool called Levels. So Image, Adjustments, Levels. Levels are a way of doing brightness and contrast, but like more controllable. So you can change this brightness and contrast to get something closer to what I'm going to do, or you can use something like this. This tool has a select for the brights and select for the darks, and I can use those to say this is where white is and this is where black is, and then I have a variance between the two. So I want the brightest of everything to be the center, or these light gray areas I want to be bright white. So I'm just going to pick a point here and say that's where the brightest of bright is. That's where full-on color is going to be. For the colors I set up in my particle system is going to be like, if that's red, it's going to be like, yeah, that's red. And then it's going to be darker as it moves away from that. I can then modify, I can like select something and say that's the darkest and therefore it's black, or I can just pull out some of the dark colors if I want to. The edge, the way that I erased it has like a lot of shadow. I'm actually just going to do this, but then erase some of that a little bit more so that we have something that doesn't have like a drop shadow to it. Just looks a little weird. Get a smaller brush. This would be much easier with like a tablet. If you have a tablet, good for you. I'm using a mouse. Just cut that around and get it close. We don't have to be perfect. At least not for this experiment. If you're working on like a final version of this, then be more perfect. So that's it. There's my piece. I'm now going to file and save, and I'm going to save it as a PNG. So there are different file formats for everything. If you have your extensions turned off, you probably don't see these. But a JPEG is common for if you ever look at like the internet and find something that isn't animated and isn't transparent, probably a JPEG. There's animated GIFs. I hate saying it that way. Animated GIFs that have transparency, but they're really low quality. A PNG it doesn't have an alpha channel so much as it has the absence of color is alpha. If you use a Targa, it has an alpha channel. So the difference between what we have here, I just have the absence of color being that, or I could go to channels and set up an alpha channel. An alpha channel would have to be painted in white, black, gray to create transparency. I just erased, so I don't need that. I'm going to use a PNG instead. If you have to make Targas, I feel bad for you because you have to paint the alpha channel. So file, save as, PNG, or ping. I don't know how you actually say that. If GIF is GIF and not GIF, then it's either ping or PNG. I don't know. So I'm going to save this as Firewing, which apparently I already have one, but I'm going to overwrite it because we're making a new one because I keep doing this. And I'm just going to save it. So now I've saved and it gives me some options of how much I want to compress it. I'm just going to hit OK. And that's going to be my my particle texture or sprite that I'm going to use. So let's go back to Unity. In Unity, scene, I'm going to go over to this torch experiment. So in the middle here, there is a ball, and this ball has particles on it. If I click on it, there you go. We can see it simulate, and this is the familiar block, fire highlight that you guys have probably seen for a while. By clicking on it, you'll see this on the inspector. There's a particle system component, and then the material. This component has a whole lot of options or properties. Things such as how long does it play, the lifetime of it. Is there a delay before it starts emitting particles? Is there a size, rotation, the emission stuff? Is it like a burst or does it repeat over time? What kind of a shape is emitting these particles? Is there color over lifetime? Does it fade out? Is there velocity to it? Does it change speed based on its, or does it change size based on its speed, that kind of stuff. You can control all of these different pieces, but it's better to look at the effect that you're making first and then decide what you need to do to mimic it. These are just tools for you to use, but you'll get lost in here just like modifying things and going, wow, that's cool, this is neat, that's fun. It's good to make stuff, but free-forming is going to get you lost. Always have reference, always have a plan. We have a plan. We're going to make fire. We've got a start. It raises over time. It's surrounding a ball. This is probably a fire that you would see in like Minecraft. We're going to, in here, in the student name folder, I've got a bunch of stuff in mind, but you have an assets folder, and then effects, and then fire particles. There's that one, and you probably also have like a texture or something. I've replaced it. Actually, no, the texture went into, sorry, scenes, LD torch, effects, that's where it is. Materials. Okay, this is a, right here, a fire plume thing. Let's see if I can see it better. I'm going to change this to the view that you guys use, 2-column. So this little plume thing right here, that came from an image. The same way as the one that I used came from an image. I think I closed the window. I had it open. That's okay. So this was originally something that I pulled out and I erased and I yanked out this semi-transparent texture. So we're going to do the same thing with the one I just downloaded, and I'm not going to use that one. If you just follow the experiment, you can use that one. Or if you don't have like Photoshop or something, you can use that one. We're going to make one from the image that I extracted. So I'm going to drag over this fire wing, and I'm just going to drop it into this materials folder right next to the other one. So there's the one that we just got. It looks kind of gross because this isn't currently using transparency, but I can now change it from a default texture. These are the import settings. You can change it to a sprite and just hit apply, and now it has transparency. And I can see there's still a little bit of stuff I may have missed, but that's okay. I can clean it up later if I want to. But there's my texture. So here's a material that the other one was using. Notice that the shader says particles additive soft. So additive meaning when they lay on top of each other, they get brighter. So that's the exact same thing that the fire was doing in the video. I want them to, when they layer on top of each other, get brighter. So I'm going to make an additive material. In materials, I'm just going to go right click, create, material, and then we're going to call this fire wing matte. And then this one starts out as a standard shader. I'm going to change the shader and then go select particles and then additive soft. And now it's the same as the other one. Particle texture says none texture. I'm going to drag in fire wing, and boom, now I have my sprite that I'm going to use. So these particles, you'll notice they're blue. That's because they're a prefab. It's the same prefab that the hub uses. So as you modify this one in this scene, it also modifies the one in the hub. That was done on purpose. Because you're not changing the ones that are in the hub, you're changing the prefab. The prefab is used in all the scenes, and anything you do to it will change all of them. There are some other, I think, experiment scenes that also have these. You'll notice them get updated in there as well. So in here, if I click on fire particles, I can get this out of the way. This is a lot of information. You can work on it in this inspector, or you can pop this out in an editor. This editor is that whole panel, but also with the ability to add other particle systems. So now I can add more particles that will expand this further. I'm not going to use this right now, but I will use that later. So this particle system, if I go to the bottom, there's something that says renderer. If I pop that open, this now has a render mode for billboard, direction, what material it uses, which I'm going to now change to the one that we just created. So I'm going to hit the little circle, pops open this browser, and I'm going to look for fire wing right there. Now if I look at it, there's little wings floating up from the ball. So little is not really what I want. I'm going to change the size of it. So the start size is going to be 1. There we go. Now we've got bigger ones. right now they're emitting kind of outside the sphere. I want it to be a little tighter. So I'm going to go into emission, and emission has, actually not emission, it just says how many are coming out over time. I want to look into shape. Shape right now is a box. You can actually see the box if I don't move around. So the box is like outside of that sphere. I'm going to pull it in so it's much closer. You don't have to use a box, but I want them to go up instead of out. So you can change like box to like a sphere, and then you see it moves away from it. Or you can do something like a cone, and then it goes up like that. Box just has them go up, so I'm going to go with box. And then I'm going to change these to be tighter. So I'm going to say 0.5, 0.5, and 0.5. There we go. So now it's like right on that sphere. It looks a little more like dusty, smoky cloud thing. You can even change it to only emit from the volume or from the shell or from the edge of the shell. Has a lot of different options for that. So this kind of looks more like smoke than fire because it's just kind of like raising. So I'm going to increase the speed. Well, faster still, you know. I want it to like tear away. So that's much faster, but now the lifetime is causing it to go way too high. So if I reduce the particle's lifetime, to like 0.5, 0.4, 3, lifetime is how long the particle stays alive. So this allows it to have a real fast speed, but it dies off after some time. I'm just going to go with like a 3 speed and then bring this lifetime back up to like 0.5. Okay. They're a little large. I want these to be used to piece together to make this effect. I'm going to emit more of them, about like 25. And then I'm going to change the size. But I'm going to change the size instead of just doing 1. I'm going to do it over lifetime. I want it to look like as it raises, they slowly like tear and pull, and I'm going to have them like shrink down and turn into embers afterwards. So if I go down to size over lifetime, turn that on. This has a curve that you can modify. So here's the curve system. If you're not looking at this window, the curve system is down here. But you can modify it in that editor if you want. So I'm going to go back to the editor. And then this one for size over lifetime, I'm going to select this, click in this box or whatever, and then I'm going to change this. Right now size is 1 across the board, but if I slant it down like here, now it goes from 1 to 0. Because of how I clicked on it, there's another axis here, so I'm going to make all of these go down. X, Y, and Z axes all the way down. Now if I look at it, it starts at 1 and then it goes down. So we're getting a little closer. It's not quite there yet. One more thing I'm just going to cover. When making really like fancy fire effects, people don't tend to use one texture. They would use a sprite sheet. And the sprite sheet would be like a actual screen cap of like actual fire that they've built into an animation. I want to show you how you can build something from nothing. So we're using what we know about fire and using a texture of fire to build something that looks close enough that it's passable for what we want it to be used for. But if you've gone through the lecture on campus we did, there's no wrong way to build something as long as you're just using the things that you're given to make it. Yeah, the only wrong way to build something is to not build it. All right, so this is looking a little closer to what we want. The video had it kind of tear and turn, so I'm going to add rotation over lifetime. And right now it says 45. I'm just going to give it a good 360 so it turns. I could go 1080 if I wanted to do it even more, but that's pretty good. So right now ours only rotates one direction. What we're going to do is finish this one off, and then we're going to make a duplicate of it and have it rotate in the opposite direction, creating that like finished look to it. So there's that. I want to make sure that the color looks like fire, so let's go to color over lifetime. Right now there's one in here. in the gradient editor. Mine has I had built a preset already, but I'm going to show you how to use this. Right now, the gradient editor has, there's a white tab, and then a white tab over here, and then you have full opacity, and then you have full transparency. So alpha is how you do transparency. If I wanted this to not be full white here, I can just add a tab and then drag this down. I just clicked next to it and a tab appeared. So now it starts faded out, fades in, and then fades out over time, which is closer to what I want it to do. So it's not popping in. Then I could go here and just change colors. It's going to do this again to me. So mine right now is not showing a color picker. I'm seeing it appear nearby. Hold on. Let me see if I can get it. No, it's just not spawning. Okay, so yours probably the color picker will show up whenever I'm doing a recording. Sometimes it doesn't work for me. You can then modify the color by yourself using the color picker. I'm going to, instead of doing that, we're going to reference the color from the fire that we took from the internet. We're going to use actual reference to make fire look like fire. So I'm going to pull this up into photos. Here we go. So there's the fire that I used. I'm just going to put it next to this so I can see some of it on the side. And then if everything works the way that it should, if I click this and mouse over to my fire, I can now select all the colors from that image. So if I want the brightest to be here, and then I can click over and select and go, okay, let's do like a less bright orange, maybe. There we go. A little more orange, click again. More orange, orange, click again. We start getting the actual colors from the image to make this fire look like fire over time. That's actually kind of the same orange. Let's get a little more red. There we go. And I'm going to select this last one and then just go all in dark red, something like that. So now we got something that's a lot closer. It's starting to really give that look to it, and it's much brighter when they're on top of each other and then fades out when it goes away. So I'm now going to take this one and duplicate it and make a separate one. Actually, real quick, I'm going to cover simulation space is set to world. That means that as I drag it, it's going to leave behind fire. If you set it to local, it'll stay right on that sphere and never leave. So you can change this to local if you want. I'm leaving it as world because I want it to pull away. So I'm going to take this particle system that I have. Actually, one more thing I want to do, start rotation. I'm going to give them random starting rotation. So there's a little more variance to this. If we're going to use a random between two constants, I'm going to use negative 45 and 45. So it's going to give them a little bit of an offset between those values. And then we'll go ahead and duplicate this. So as I duplicate it, I'm going to then drag it under this one, and you'll see it popped up into my editor. Now I've got two of them to work with. This one is going to rotate opposite. Rotation over lifetime, negative 360. Cool. Now if I look at it, we've taken this one image and merged them together to create something that's a little more like fire. Now you can go a step further and be like, cool, this is great for, maybe like the embers that pull and tear away, but maybe I want it to be like a much more roaring middle piece. Well, then you would create another particle system to add that new element to your fire. Each one of these things can be broken down to multiple pieces to make something that looks like what you think it is. For this video, I'm going to stop with these two, but I recommend you take it further and make, a few more pieces or parts. Like smoke would be a whole nother part to that. So that's the fire that I'm going to use. There's also a point light here, and this point light I can then reference maybe the bright yellow, and now the area is going to be more fire lit because I'm using the same color from this. It's going to look like the fire is lighting everything. So if this is a prefab, then if I want the changes to be saved, I want to apply to the prefab. So I'm going to hit apply, And that's now going to send that data to every fire effect that references that. So if I save this and hit play, make sure it's maximize, play, I can now turn around and see my fire. Dun, 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 dun. So there's the fire effect. Looks pretty good. I could spend time changing the size, changing the speed, getting it to be something a little more, but for me, for right now, this is good. And then this is also a fizz object, so if I use my grab null, I can move this, maybe. There we go. So now I can carry this little fireball, and it leaves behind a trail behind it because it's spawning in world space. Then if I go over to a torch, I can light it. And then it turns the torch on. Then I can go to the next one and light it. Now, nothing's going to happen when I light all of these other than make this scene look a little nicer. But we're going to make something that happens. So I'm going to put this down. Try not to burn that grass. And we're going to make a script. So I'm going to pull back up the torch experiment. This is where we left off. So we're going to turn this into an objective. We're going to make a script called torch objective, and it's going to be a modified version of what you've seen for the objective volume scripts that you used in the island. We're not going to be checking, though, to see if the player enters. So here's the script all written out, ready to go with comments and everything. I'm going to pull this to the side and just type it and talk about it as I'm typing it. So yank. And then if you're watching the video, you can totally just pull the page up and do it. I'm looking at the time, running a little low on time. All right, so in the LD torch scene, I'm just going to create a script, and I'm going to call it, I'm going to put my initials on it. Make sure you're always like naming things properly. If everyone does the torch experiment and everyone makes a torch objective script, you're going to have issues when you merge your projects. So DM for my initials, torch objective. I'm going to dive in here. Okay, now that Visual Studio has booted, there's my empty script. Now I'm going to start populating it with things I need. So in order for an objective to work, I need to talk to the objective system. So I'm going to make a variable private objective list, and I'll just call it obj because I don't want to type objective list again. And then the objectives use an identifier or a nickname, and then the actual objective name for if you want to send a message or something. So I'm going to say public string objective identifier, or you could say short name, or you could say something. That's good for now. Public string objective name. Okay, so the name's going to be like light all the torches in the hub, and the identifier is going to be like LD_torch or something. I'm also going to need the message system so that I can send a message for when you complete it. So I'm going to say private message system, MSG is the name of my variable, and then we're going to go, I don't really need a variable here, but we'll use it anyway. So private string message from, for who's sending it. The person that's sending it is going to say objective complete. And then private string, do I use body? I think that one isn't used. Yeah, I don't use body, so I'm not going to make that variable. The one that's on the page has it, but you don't actually use it. And then we're going to use private float message time. Message time is used for how long the message is displayed. All right, and then our last piece, the most important piece to this objective, is a way to store all of the torches anywhere and being able to turn them off and then check to see if they turn on. Actually, they turn off already. We just need to make sure that they've been turned back on. So I'm going to make a private array, and the array is going to be of type torchlight. The reason why I'm doing torchlight is that torchlight already exists in your project. That is the script that is on these torches that tell them to turn off if the torch experiment scene has been loaded. So that's how I'm going to check. If you duplicate the torches from the hub and use them in your project, these will turn out as well, and then you'll have to turn on more than just 4. But it could be of use to you if you just want to add a torch lighting area and use those pieces for it. So to make this an array, you have to put 2 square brackets, and now this can take multiple torch lights into it. And then I'm going to call it torches. So an array of torches that we can fill out. Alrighty, so I already have a start function. So in the start function, I'm going to store our objective system and our message system, because we can't use it unless we do. Obj equals find object of type, and the type I'm looking for is objective list. There you go. So I'm doing find object of type in our documents. You'll notice it says game object dot find object of type, but it kind of goes semi-transparent. It goes a little darker because that's not necessary. It's just the method that we have you go through to make sure that it's that you're stepping through stuff. You're already at the game object level, so that doesn't need to be there. But if you want to be get in a good habit of things, just put it in front of it. Just trying to clarify why it's not there on this script, but it's there in the tools page. Both work. Like if I type it like this, find object of type, message system, that's the same. Or not message system. There you go. So both of those are the same. It's just the method that works better for you. So I'll add this in here now so it doesn't bother people. Save. And then the other piece was we need to fill out our array of torches. So these all fill out on start. I'm going to have torches as well populate this array on start. So we're not going to hand drag in each one that we want to talk to. I'm just going to shoot out a thing and say, hey, I need these. So I'm going to say game object dot find not object but objects of type. So now I can shoot out a function and say, hey, anything that has this component, I want you to store that. Collect all torches. Go there. Okay. So save. And then if I go take a peek at this, I'm going to drag this onto, I'm going to make an empty in my scene, I guess. So I'm set torch is active, create empty, and call this torch objective. And this is just going to be an empty game object that exists. And I'm going to drag this script onto it. This script has the identifier and the name. I'm going to make my torch light array public. There we go. Just so we can see that this works. So that's going to be public. You're going to see this array pop up. So it says torches, and then right now it says 0. So you could make this 4 and then drag 4 torch lights in here, and then it would only be those 4. But on start, we're collecting them all and then storing them. So if this is 0 and I were to hit play, it's going to grab all of them and force them into that array. So I'm now populated and ready to go to check them to see if they're working or not. The other thing I want to do is make sure that my my identifier is set up. So I'm going to say LD torch. That's going to be the nickname I give the objective, and then the objective name is going to be light all the torches. All right, so that's set up, and now I'm going to go down to let's do here, the update part. So in update, I'm going to need to check how many lights are on. This is going to be the logic for this objective. The objective can only be completed once all lights are on. So I'm going to make a local variable to count. It's going to be int light count, and it's going to start at 0. Every frame I'm going to return it to 0 until it's max. I want to make sure that this objective cannot be created until that number in one frame counts to 4. And every time we get to the bottom of the frame, I'm going to be like, you're wrong, you're 0. Because if all of them are not on, none of them are on. Just the way that I wrote this. There's another way you could probably write this, but that was how my thought process went. So I added to check how many lights are on. All right, we're going to use a for each loop, which is, I don't know if you guys have used that before in the earlier programming classes, but what it's going to do is we have an array that has a bunch of objects in it, and we're going to say for each object that's in this array, we're going to do something to it. So for each, the array is of type torchlight. So we're saying each torchlight component that is inside of our array. So whenever you're doing a variable, you have to give it a name so you can talk to it. So in this for each loop, this one line is going to be like having, let's say, the light count variable. It was an integer, and we called it light count. This is a torchlight, and we're going to call it T, just so I can write T. And then we're going to say for each torchlight, which we're going to call T, inside of torches. So every time we loop through torches, we're going to store the next torchlight into T so we can talk to it. And then in here, this is going to be a loop. So this is one loop. And it's going to loop each time and do the same thing over and over. So in here, we're going to say, if this is one loop, we're going to check if T, being the torch, dot, we're going to use the period to open up the properties list. The properties list has a bunch of stuff in here. The thing that we're looking for is, if you go over to Unity and look at this torch, not this torch, sorry, hub. Let's go to hub. Let's go to particles, torchlight. So here's the torchlights that are in here. There's the torchlight script that knows that you've loaded this experiment up. And then there's something called myFire. MyFire is the effect. That is how it turns itself off. So if that's how it turns itself off, I'm going to use that to check to see if it's on. So I put a period after this T. I'm going to say myFire being the variable. And I'm going to check to see if that fire, active self, if it's turned on. I'm going to say first, is it not on? Is this off? And if it's off, I'm going to force light count to equal 0. It's like, if it's off, I don't care. All of them have to be on. All of them have to be on in one loop. And then otherwise, if it's on, so else, the only other thing that a Boolean like active self can be is true. So else light count plus plus. So the reason why I said one loop is it's going to sit here and do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's going to move on. So it has to do that whole thing for each torchlight that's there before we can move on to the rest of the update call. So it's going to count 1, 2, 3, not good. 1, 2, 3, 4, great. So after this thing does its for loops, so this for each, do this for each torchlight that is in torches. There we go. So this is going to happen for each one that's there, and then inside of it we've defined the one loop that happens to all of them. All right, and then after the for each, I'm going to say if light count, being the thing that we've counted with, is compared to torches being the array, and then to check how many things are in it, you can just say dot length. Length is how many elements are inside of an array. So if the light count is 4 and we have 4 in the length, or the light count is 2 and we have 2 in the length, or 12, this will work for every possible setup of torches. I can make a whole room of torches if I want to and light all of them. So once they're all turned on and it's the same as the array, then I'm going to tell the objective system to complete an objective, which is going to take that objective identifier. So we're completing the correct one. We're going to send a message, new message from the message system. We're going to use the from for who's sending it, which is going to say objective complete. We're then going to make a string here. You've completed. We're going to use bold, and then color equals green. So that's rich text, similar to like billboards or bulletin boards on the internet or websites or WordPress, that sort of thing. Put a space here, and then I'm going to add in the objective name so that it says you've completed the name of the objective, and then add another string. We're going to end the color, then end the bold, and then after that, comma and message time so that it goes away after some time. So that message will fire off when we finish this. And then finally, I'm going to get rid of this torch object, this objective object, because we're not going to use it anymore. So just destroy game object. All right, save. Now we need this to be created before it can be completed. In the scene here, I'm going to put one of our create objective prefabs. So right here, tools, create, put create right here. There we go. And then this will create when I step into this area. Slide that back. Make it a little bigger. Okay, so the objective that we're creating is going to be it was LD torch, so identifier LD underscore torch. The name of it was, let's find out. What did we say it was? Light all the torches. So I'm going to copy that, Control C, go back to my create, and paste it here so they say the same thing. And then the volume it's going to turn on is torch objective. So when I create this objective, that one's going to turn on, and then I'm going to be able to check how many torches are turned on. So let's step through that. I'm going to hit play, or hold on, set active on hub, hit play, and then torches are off. I have no objective. If I run over to this fancy ball over here, it's going to say light all the torches. Okay, well that's useful for this. I'm going to grab it with my grabnel, step out into the hub, and start lighting these torches. So there's one, there's two, there's two more at the front. Run, 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 run. One here and one here. Complete. You've lit all the torches. The objective is done. I can drop my flaming ball, and that's the end of the experiment. So as I said earlier, the effect can be made much more complex. You can add more things to it, such as smoke and other things, and then when you apply it to the prefab, it'll go everywhere. You can add more torches if you want to have more to check, but this was the experiment for creating a particle system, modifying a texture or a sprite. We went through transparency. We went through an objective that checks other arrays. There's a lot in here. It's complex. If you're confused after you watch this once, step back through it. But it's a very, very cool, simple thing you can do. So thanks, everyone, and good luck on your effects.